Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
I think we're live.
Okay, we are now.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to this very, very special collaboration between NZF and Islamic Finance Guru. We're going to spend this hour going into all of the fun subjects when it comes to zakat. So last time we did a session, Mufti Saab. We went through, did a live masterclass of how to actually work out your zakat. Today we're going to go into all of the nitty gritty and volatile subjects that always come up when it comes to investing. So inshallah, we're going to get into all of that. To give you a bit of a preview, we're going to talk about cryptocurrency, because if you're gonna have a proper discussion about zakat, you have to have a discussion about cryptocurrency, right? These days. And then we're going to talk about investing. We'll talk a little bit about investing generally, what makes it halal and haram, and then also in particular run through some of the more common investments, Sharia compliant investments out there that Mufti Sahib, a lot of them you've advised on, and we've covered on Islamic Finance Guru as well. And then finally, we shall wrap up with pensions, which is everyone should have one, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well, but also the zakat aspect and the Sharia compliance aspect of it as well. So without further ado, let's dive in. Mufti Sahib, firstly, welcome, and it's great to have you on. And secondly, it'd be great to hear your perspectives on cryptocurrency, how you think about it, what are they in the first place?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you here. To be honest, I don't know if I'm NZF World, IFG. I have the blessing and privilege to work with both organizations very closely. So I really sit in the middle, right? And benefit from both parties and benefit from IFG immensely. I mean, cryptocurrencies, look, what are they? To be honest, that question, if we look at it from a philosophical perspective, it's still not been answered properly, right? There's a debate on even what cryptocurrencies are. But I mean, just to make it easy for the audience, right? It's just a digital asset, right? Which is online and it has utility value. That's it, right? In a very easy case. Ibrahim, I was thinking about this just today. If I was to explain cryptocurrencies or these assets, think about it. When we had the financialization of the economy, we had financial assets, right? Financial assets, when they were created, there was a huge discussion among scholars. What are they? Are they Sharia compliant? What do they represent? What's happened? Financial assets, they are financial, traded on the markets and everything, but are connected to real assets. Now we've got the digitization of assets. There's from financial assets, we moved one step higher, right? Where even the underlying assets are all digital in nature. So if you look at blockchain, the infrastructure, even that's digital. And I guess that's one of the ways to understand crypto is just like another layer of, we'd say, instead of financial assets, these are like digital assets where through and through, what you're trading and what's being represented is just digital, right? And that's one way just to understand, I would say, crypto assets. They're different to financial assets and real assets where they exist in the digital realm, which is truly reasonable and possible given the technology that we have today. In terms of scholarly opinions, and Ibrahim, I'm sure you've seen so many of different views. I would say there's like 4 views on whether cryptocurrencies are Sharia compliant or not. You'll find a view on every single end of the spectrum, from the permissible to the impermissible. And we respect all views. To be honest, all views are held by senior scholars. And as followers of scholars, we just have utmost respect for all the views. And we always advise you just follow the scholar that you have most trust in and reliance in financial matters.
Definitely. I'm seeing this. Even cryptocurrency, even crypto, you guys are trying to Islamize and make money out of, lol. Come on, Rami, we have to try, don't we? But no, I think it's a fair point about cryptocurrency, and sometimes people, if they're coming in cold, they might think that this is obviously just a currency. It's like, it's really simple. It's like, it's halal, right? There's no kind of shubha. There's no kind of gray areas or doubts about this. Why are scholars getting all hot under the collar about this being halal or this being haram? So I guess, Mufti Sahib, maybe it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on the different kinds of cryptocurrency out there, and maybe use that as a way of maybe giving a bit more light on this whole subject. So like maybe if we frame it like this, so that you've got traditional cryptocurrencies, things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then you've got other kinds of cryptocurrencies now coming in. So maybe like liquidity pools or decentralized finance, that kind of whole area. And then you have these kind of adjacents to cryptocurrencies. So they're like just like basically blockchain projects that are not really cryptocurrencies or decentralized finance. They're just kind of doing their own thing. Yeah, love to hear your views on how the FIP, how Islam approaches these, and why it's important for us to think about it from an Islamic perspective.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to cryptos, right? There's so many different types of cryptos, right? As you rightly mentioned. So, for example, the most common and obvious one is Bitcoin, right, which we know. What we generally in the market, what that's referred to like either a cryptocurrency, a currency coin, or a payment token, right? The FCA has written on this. The PwC have also written on this in terms of how do we categorize the different cryptos that are out there. And you're absolutely right that not every crypto is Sharia compliant. Not every crypto is or has a valid use or utility. Many of them are scams, which is the truth, right? If you look at the data and the statistics on this, many of them are useless. They're just there as like schemes just to make money. But some, and there are quite a few, which do have real value, real vision, and a view to make a difference in the digital kind of world. So if you look at the number one, I would say is the Bitcoin type of coins, which is like the payment tokens, currency tokens, or currency coins, which the utility objective behind such tokens is purely to develop an alternative to fiat currency. It's an alternative payment mechanism. When it comes to these types of tokens, what we look at and focus on is this is a bona fide project. It's genuine. It wants to serve as a payment mechanism. In that, my personal view is that it is Sharia compliant because it's trying to develop something. We might not call it currency, right? But it's definitely a medium of exchange, right? And there's a difference between that. Something which is a currency, which is like a universal agreed upon kind of payment, and something can just be a currency or a medium of exchange within a closed network, right? So, for example, you might have a network between, like a platform or something, where you use a particular coin, or you use a miles, for example, air miles, right, or nectar points. That is a form of payment within a closed network, but it's not currency in the universal sense. So it's something along those lines. So that's one type, right? The second type I would say are like security tokens, and what we mean by that is these are like digital equivalent of your traditional securities. So your this equity and stuff, right? You can create an equity token nowadays, which is a security token. So any person who owns this token would have a stake in the underlying project. Right? Number three, utility tokens, very common, like Ethereum, as you mentioned. The idea is that these tokens give you a service on the platform, blockchain, whatever is a protocol that gives you a valid service. Some, for example, there was one platform where if you use that token, you can download and stream media. That's the service of that token, right? So that's what you pay with, and that's how you use this token and the utility that you receive in lieu of that token. So that's a different type of token, a utility token. We have asset-backed tokens, where these tokens represent ownership in an asset, such as gold. We have governance tokens, which give the holder or the owner the rights to vote on a protocol. These are the different types of tokens, and of course, every token has to be reviewed. You have to understand what the project is from a Sharia perspective. Does it pass from a business activity? Is it the utility the token wire represents? Is that Sharia compliant? What are like the financials and fundamentals? All of this needs to be reviewed, like how we review shares. Yes, it's not as volatile as shares where you have to review every quarter based on the latest financial statements, but still, there has to be a review to understand what's going on.
Mufti Saab, we should talk about Zakat and crypto, but before that, I can't resist, discussing Zain Luqman's question, which is, what about tokens like SafeMoon, which are built on hype and no product? There is just lots of noise in TikTok videos.
100%, I agree. Look, there's a lot of cryptos out there which are just useless, right? Just pure scams and just honestly, and we've been seeing like these projects come and they go, much like many Islamic quote unquote projects, right, that come on the crypto scene. There's literally nothing in them. They're just like shallow projects. And I think this is the area why we need regulation. We need regulation in this space because that will definitely reduce these kinds of like ridiculous projects that we see.
Definitely. No, I hear you on that. Why don't we talk a little bit about zakat on crypto? Because there's a few people asking about that, and it is I guess we're heading into the final 10 nights now. So people will be giving their zakat. If they're holding cryptocurrency, how should they think about giving zakat? Maybe like practical examples might be, let's say a person is holding a bit of Bitcoin. They're also holding a bit of maybe like, yeah, and maybe they might be holding some like H bar, which is like this. I don't know if you've come across it, but me and Mohsin are very keen on it. And then you've got maybe like sushi swap or like pancake or all of those kind of DeFi kind of things.
Yeah.
How should I think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I will not mention all the tokens because I don't want anybody to think that's a view of it being Sharia compliant, right? But what I
Yeah.
will do is, if we were to have like three scenarios, right? So Bitcoin is majority of scholars who are of the view that cryptocurrencies are Sharia compliant or can be Sharia compliant are of the view that Bitcoin is fine. So Bitcoin will always be zakatable, right? Anything which is Bitcoin or Bitcoin-like, meaning it functions like Bitcoin, that it's a payment mechanism, it's a medium of exchange, then that will always be zakatable, regardless of your intention. Whether you're holding long term, you're trading short term, doesn't matter. So that's the first type. Second type, I would say, are those tokens where people are just trading. You've bought them low, want to sell high. That's your only intention. You have no other intention. You don't even care about the product, really, right? All your friends have told you, look, buy this token. It's going to increase. I've done my research. You buy it and just sell it after a month or two. That's also zakatable, right? The third type of tokens are where, look, a person invests, for example, in Ethereum or any kind of token which is part of like a DeFi product or something, any Sharia compliant. The idea is not to trade right now. You're not interested in selling high. Rather, you believe in the project. You feel that it will have value long term, but it's a utility as well that's also appealing to you. So you're holding this token. If that's the case, that would be like an investment. It will not be the same ruling as previously, where zakat will be done the full amount. But majority of the people, just from my experience in engaging with zakat payers, most traders and most individuals are there just for trading purposes. They're only there with an interest to buy low and sell high, right? I'm yet to find people who are genuinely investing in Bitcoin for the kind of long-term, you could say, business plan of a project.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. Okay, cool. So I think that's probably wrapped up Zakat and cryptocurrency. And by the way, guys, NZF have brought out a new facility where you can actually donate in crypto. I knew it was going to come up with that link at the bottom. So NZA/give dash crypto is where you can give in Bitcoin and in Ethereum, should you wish. So there we have it. And by the way, look, if I know that there's lots of questions about cryptocurrency, and inshallah, maybe we should do like a proper webinar or series on this at some point. But in the interim, there's always a lot of the resources on the internet. So, a lot of questions have been answered on forum.islamicfinanceguru.com. Mufti Faraz's website, Amana Advisors, has lots of resources that you can check out as well. So, I would say probably about 75% of questions have already been answered, at least in some way, shape, or form. Okay, let's move on now, inshallah, to investments. So this is where it all gets very exciting because people are trying to make some money. Mufti Saab, when people are thinking about investing generally, what are the high level, just like from a Shari'i perspective, what are the high level principles that they should keep in mind to make sure that they're on the straight and narrow and they're not veering off into, Nara Jahannam?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, if to keep it very easy, there's two key things you have to be very cautious of, or what is considered for in terms of investment purposes. Number one is the business activity, or what are the operations of a company wherever you're investing, right? So if you're investing in a project, a company, look at what it is. If there's equity, right? Look at what are they doing. That's the first thing. Number two, look at it in terms of how much interest exposure is there, how much impure income is there, right? These two will really underpin whether an investment is Sharia compliant or not. So if you are, for example, investing in a financing platform, which are using your funds to finance and invest into other companies, the interest element will be the key thing. If they have Sharia compliant investments and financing mechanisms, there'll be no interest exposure. And of course, financing them will be in a Sharia compliant way. If you're investing in an equity on the market somewhere, you find a company, FTSE 100 or Nasdaq or whatever, and you know the main business activity is uh, alcohol and beverage, right? You know straight away to abstain. So that's at a high level in terms of um, what you need to be mindful of. But I always tell people that you should either do some research, the fundamental analysis, look at what the Sharia screening is of a company if you can afford to do that and you have the skills. Otherwise, it's best just to sign up to an app which does this for you and gives you a breakdown.
Jazakallah khair, Mufti Saab. Alicia Kayla is, by the way, to all people who are watching this on Facebook, a classic example of a message that you should be very, very wary of. She has, said, "Text me if you're interested in making profits through crypto investment." I would not text her. Is my views on it. And this is, you'll see this kind of message, across the internet in the comment sections. Just don't do it, guys. It's a rabbit hole, and you're going to end up losing money. Let's talk a little bit about Zakat principles when it comes to investing. I know, Mufti Saab, you did a lot of research on this in recent weeks, and you've been thinking a lot about how the distinction works between long-term investing and trading and what have you. How should Muslims generally? What are the kind of key principles from a Zakat perspective to keep in mind when thinking about their investing?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to investments, if it's like your short-term trading, what I mean by that, you buy and sell equity or investments purely just to make some quick profit. That's your mindset, You just want to get rid of it and flip it quickly. That's all you're doing. You're not there to hold it as an invest. For example, I've purchased land overseas. I'm holding it for long-term purposes. Maybe in the future, when I retire, I can liquidate and sell that and benefit, right? It's not that intention. Rather, my intention is I just want to buy and sell, make some quick money, whether it's like a monthly turnover or quarterly turnover. But I'm only there with one kind of intention. I'm there to buy low and sell high. That's all I'm doing. That's all my focus is. Zakah will always be due then on those types of investments at the full current market value, as opposed to this like idea of buying a land overseas or buying a land somewhere and saying this is like my retirement kind of it's my savings plan, right? I can sell this in 20 years time, 30 years time, and that's when I'll benefit from the value of the value of the land or real estate. In that scenario, zakat will not be due on that because right now you're not selling, neither do you have an intention to sell.
Makes a lot of sense. And then why don't we run through a little bit through the more popular investment categories out there? I don't know if you've got that nice diagram that you put on. I think it was LinkedIn recently. That was really helpful for people. Maybe we can share that in some way, shape, or form. Like, I mean, I guess people can find you on. Is it on Twitter as well? I imagine.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I can try and pull that up and share with people. But in the interim, yeah, over to you, Mufti Saab, in terms of how do we think about some of the more popular investments, like, for example, let's kick off with Wahid and Yielders.
Yes, look, when it comes to Wahid Invest have portfolios of different assets, right? So they depending on your kind of risk return profile, you'll have a very aggressive or very conservative portfolio. In that instance, you have to see what does the portfolio consist of. If it's majority equity, then zakat on equities will apply, right? And of course, there'll be some gold, so 2.5% on the full value of gold. For equities, as you know, we are of the view that you can take 25%. That should suffice your zakat liability on equity. And then you might have some sukuk. Usually a sukuk or ijara sukuk, right? They're the most common types of sukuk that are out there. Then that'll be on the rental income. So that just gives you kind of an understanding of what Wahid invest. It's always good to understand your portfolio for zakat perspectives. The next thing is yielders. With yielders, because these are properties like buy to let or real estate which is on lease, then or residential properties as well, then it's an ijara is property crowdfunding, and therefore zakat will only be due upon the rental income, not the full investment value. So if I've invested £10,000 in yielders, as an example, I will not pay zakat on my investment value. Rather, it's the earnings that I receive, which will be the rent, and only that which is retained with me on my zakat anniversary or zakat year end.
Makes a lot of sense. And I guess on the theme of the property related stuff, you've got this like top yielders, which is more on the development side of things, and then you've got these days Intro Crowd. There's Godwin out there as well. How should we be thinking about these kind of investments?
Yeah, so like for property development, strategic land development, where the idea is you're investing in an SPV, you're investing in a vehicle which is buying something just to sell. That's the only intention of the SPV. It's not really, it doesn't have any other operations in there, right? The shell company is just there to hold the underlying asset. In that instance, because the only intention is to resell this asset, right, with a profit, then my personal view is that it is zakatable. And this is also, I've discussed it with a number of other scholars, muftis, and they're of the same view. Now, when it's just an SPV, a single asset, which is a buy to sell, right? That's all it is. That's the clear intention. Then in that scenario, it will be zakatable every single year on the full investment value.
Makes a lot of sense. And I guess how I know there's like a slightly different perspective provided by Ethis on this stuff. I guess if there is a company that has its own Sharia scholarly board and they've given their guidance, how should the average Muslim think about it?
I mean, I've yet to review that view of theirs, to be honest. I've not read the view in its entirety. But I mean, my personal view on this is when there's a Sharia board, a Sharia scholar, I always respect that view. So if you've made an investment in a particular company and the Sharia board of that particular company says XYZ, then it's a valid view because it's from those who are experts in the Sharia. You're more than welcome to follow this. But then I would also say make sure that it aligns with a particular madhab that you follow, right? So because when it comes to zakat, as you know, it's a worship, it should be also aligning with the principles you follow in the rest of your calculation. Because, for example, somebody might be paying zakat on their gold. They abide or follow the view that zakat is due upon all gold. But then there might be a scholar who says zakat is not due upon gold, right? So you still have to go with the view that you generally follow for your own calculation and for your own perspective. So just that's something to be mindful of. But we always respect the views of all scholars. And if it's a Sharia board, you can follow that view.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's talk a little bit about shares now, as I guess this is a relevant question for this as well. Maybe if we talk a little bit about Simply Ethical, Agaz Invest, I guess Wahid would fall into this as well again. And then there's a question by Qasim, which is buying and holding strategies for shares. Do we apply a proxy of 25% on the value if difficult to determine underlying zakatable assets? So yeah, over to you, Mufti Sahib. I know there's like four
For
questions.
Qasim's question, you're right. So anytime when you're investing into shares for long term, for growth, for income purposes, the idea is not to trade. You're not trading. And many people are not trading when it comes to shares. You're there to create a portfolio for long term, right? In that instance, you can take a 25% proxy. I mean, this 25% proxy, where it comes from is NZF, I think maybe 3-4 years ago, with a few colleagues of mine, we sat together and we looked at the FTSE 100. And we reviewed every single balance sheet of all the FTSE 100 companies, and 66 out of the 100 had net zakatable assets below 25%, right? And the other 34 were generally non-Sharia compliant companies, like your investment, your banks, insurance companies, alcohol, tobacco, and these things. So that gave us assurance that if a person takes 25% as a proxy, then inshallah, it should suffice your zakat liability. So this was done on the FTSE 100. Ibrahim, one question I always get, and it's just good to get your thoughts on this as well, and I'll share what I think is, people ask, can we apply this to NASDAQ and S&P 500? My personal view is you probably can, knowing that the developed markets generally have the same kind of balance sheets, if they depending on the sector, right? But the sectors are generally the same. Like, so the banks in the UK, banks in America generally have similar kind of balance sheets. Their income or P&L statements, their cash flow statements, generally the same in developed markets. So I would assume, being that the economics is generally the same as well, right? Whatever happens, the US impacts here. This is a global economy. I would assume that generally speaking, the percentages probably apply overseas. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that live actually whilst you were talking. My views would be that in the US in particular, which is very tech heavy, particularly things like the Nasdaq, you typically see relatively low debt in any case. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that 25% is a very is like very safe over there. Where I think it would maybe like it might need to be looked at again is like UK small cap. Again, I don't think it would differentiate massively, but I think UK small cap would be a different kind of class of company compared to like the FTSE 100 or a lot of the larger US stocks. And I suspect that 25% is perfectly fine for them as well. But I'd be interested to see what the analysis would look like there. But broadly speaking, I think 25% is a very it seems like a very safe approach overall.
Inshallah, the plan is after Ramadan to do a full review of the Nasdaq and S&P. I've already put this on paper, so inshallah we've blocked out like 6 months to do this, right? To review, because many people invest in the US market, right? So it's something that we need to iron out.
Brilliant. Look forward to it. And then I guess the final section, the final two would be like in the alternative assets, three in the alternative assets category. So we've got Gordus, then we've got Minted, and then we've got IFG.VC.
Okay, yeah, so for Qardus, because that works in commodity murabaha, zakat is due on the entire outstanding balance of your investment. So if you invested, for example, 10,000, you've already received, because they pay you regularly, periodically, you get your payment. So just say you have, if you invested 10,000, you have 8,000, you have 9,000, that's your capital plus profit remaining, then you'll pay zakat on the full outstanding balance on your zakat year end, right? Because it's a buy and sell commodity murabaha, so the full amount is zakatable. You're minted, in regards to minted, because that is gold, you invest and own gold as part of that kind of platform. Therefore, zakat again is due upon the full value of the gold. That's according to all madhabs, because the madhabs who say zakat is not due on gold, that's specific to jewelry and what women wear, that's a personal kind of asset. Because this is investment gold, it'll always be zakatable according to everybody. And then I would say the last one is IFG. I'll let you comment more on that. I mean, you can discuss IFG VC, because it's a startup investments. This is where it gets tricky, where it's more about the underlying assets. What are the underlying assets in a company? As you become a shareholder, and you're there for the long term, or medium to long term anyway, before you exit. So nobody's selling right now, neither is that your intention, but it's a business, you're part of a business now, you have equity in that. And so it would really be more about the underlying assets within a company.
Makes a lot of sense. On this, I guess there's a slight one other question that could come up, I guess related to startups, but also all kind of investing, is what if you can't pay that zakat that seems to be due? How do you think about that? Because a friend of mine who's recently raised 20 million pounds for his startup, he wants to call me to work out his zakat. And I've been trying to avoid that conversation because I know where this is going to end up. How should you think about that? Because it's not just entrepreneurs who raise that amount of money. It could be we were discussing before, Mufti Sahib, about pensioners, and there's lots of people who have situations where they can't pay the money because they don't have the cash liquid, but there seems to be zakat due. How do you think about that?
Yes, look, the founders, right? They don't have to pay zakat on the full money that they have, right? It's because, think about it, they have to pay upon their percentage that they own, that they've retained as part of their shareholding. That's all they have to be concerned of. The other investors, So look, there's two issues here. One is about the zakat on the startup. The other is about the ability to pay on the startup, right? The zakat. So we are of the view that yes, it's the underlying assets are zakatable annually. When it comes to paying zakat, if it's difficult, for example, you're asset rich and cash, poor, in many instances, you don't have the liquidity to pay the zakat. Then there's the ability to either pay in kind, where if you have assets, right, and this applies to all businesses, you can give assets as zakat, where you value them and pay them as zakat. Alternatively, if it's difficult to pay, you don't have the liquidity or the cash to pay all in one go, you can enter into like a payment plan where you pay £5 a month, £10 a month. You keep doing that and have it written down somewhere that if a person was to pass away, at least those who deal with your estate can say, okay, this person had £3,000 of zakat outstanding. Let's fulfill that from the estate, and that would be done then, because that would be your letter of wishes, and that's the way we should go about doing this. So, not having the ability to pay zakat is perfectly understandable. Inshallah, Allah understands that as well. But our duty is to make the best possible endeavor to meet that obligation.
Makes a lot of sense. And there's no like element of compounding here, is there? Like you just add it all up.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Well, there we are. That should, I think, inshallah, help a lot of people with their investing journeys. Let me just give a quick flick through the questions just to make sure that we haven't missed anything. I think we're good for now. Let's move on to pensions. So, Mufti Sahib, there's, I guess, two broad kinds of pensions out there, right, in the UK, but also, globally. So you've got these defined contribution pensions where you pay money in and that money is invested and then you get something out at the end of it. And then you've got these defined benefit pensions where what you get out is some kind of multiple of your salary or some other complex formula that spits out a number at the end. But the bottom line is that money isn't related to any underlying investments, and you certainly don't have any control over any investments. So defined benefit, defined contribution. How does the Sharia think about these kinds of pensions, and how is it zakatable?
Yeah, I mean, so you're absolutely right. So these two types of pensions that we have, the defined benefit scheme, which, as you mentioned, has like two common formulae to work out the benefits a person receives upon retirement: the career average, where they look at your average salary across your career, and secondly is the final salary, where they take your final salary last year before retirement and use that to work out your benefits, how much you'll be paid. Now, these formulae are there, but in terms of zakat, in terms of, for example, Sharia compliance, first of all, scholars are of the view that, look, this is not a money for money transaction. What's happening is your money is being retained. So amount of your salary from your gross salary is being cut off, right? And your employer is contributing or match funding and paying into your pension. They take the responsibility. Look, we're retaining this amount. We're not giving it to you. We'll give it to you when you retire. So your salary is almost retained, and you'll receive a deferred income upon retirement. And what happens is the employer will take this money away. They'll bear the investment risk. They will go and invest wherever they want. And all you are due, you have a claim and a receivable, or a liability, or claim and receivable due to you, which will be paid to you when you retire. That's the kind of makeup of that fund. From a Sharia perspective, all you have is a claim, right? The claim is on your employer. What the employer does with that money, where they invest, that's got nothing to do with you, right? That's their responsibility. Of course, if it's a Muslim, they have to ensure that the underlying investments are Sharia compliant. If your employer is a Muslim, if they're non-Muslim, then of course, as we know, they're not to follow Sharia principles of investments, and therefore they may invest wherever they want. All you have is a claim, and they're due to pay you that claim. And my personal view, and I know many other scholars are of the view that this is permissible because all you have is a claim as part of your salary. That's defined benefit scheme. When it comes to zakat, there's no zakat due upon that because you do not own the investments within the fund. Your employer owns that. And that's why, Ibrahim, as you know, right, the government wants to move away from defined benefit scheme because all the risk rests upon the employer. And as you know, the longevity issue, right, people are outliving, right, and living longer. It means that it's those who are enrolled in pensions right now are really paying off the pensioners right now, right? Those who are retired. If the whole scheme has become upside down. So what we're seeing is everybody's being shifted over to a defined contribution scheme. That's what's happening long term. So defined benefit schemes only now are in the public sector and civil service. So that your NHS, your police, your fire brigades, and these teachers, and these types of roles. Besides that, most people have defined contribution schemes. So there's no zakat on your defined benefit scheme. You don't own the investments in there. When it comes to defined contribution schemes, there is zakat. It's your fund, your investment. You can opt in, you can opt out. You can switch funds. It's a long-term investment because, of course, it's for your retirement. If the government allowed you to withdraw those funds at any time, what would happen, Ibrahim? I want to go, for example, for Hajj, or I want to buy a car, I want to buy a house. What would I do? What's the first thing I would do? Right? What would I do? I would tap into my pension, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And that's what the government is trying to avoid. That's why it's locked in for a number of, until I think at the age of 55, we can draw down as 25% tax-free. And so that is zakatable nevertheless, but the percentage, it depends upon what your investment is held in.
And on this, Mufti Saab, so some people will have holdings in sukuk, and then other people will have holdings in real estate funds, and then other people will have holdings in haram, like bonds, for example. How do they deal with each of those three?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So what we did, I think 2 years ago now, in ZF, I reviewed 100 pension funds. So I looked at 20 Sharia compliant funds, I looked at 20 property funds, I looked at 20 corporate bond funds, fixed income, I looked at 20 diversified mixed asset funds, and 20 equity funds. Right, so I looked at 100, and then we looked at the weighted average in each one. So for Sharia compliant, for example, the Sharia compliant funds, we know that if a person uses 26% of the proxy, inshallah, that will cover the zakat liability. That means in any kind of pension fund, Sharia compliant fund, only 26% of the assets are Sharia compliant. If you look at a property fund, you can take 15% because based on my research, in property funds, as everybody would know, majority of the assets are composed of property, which are not zakatable. But as all funds, they always have a small percentage in cash, money market securities, and other things, right? Like other asset class, which is like a broad brush they use for all these little investment asset classes. So 15% is a strong and good enough proxy to cover the liability in a property fund. A equity, we found between a Sharia, and this is something that might be interesting to yourself as well. We found that equity funds are slightly more zakatable assets because, of course, they might have bonds, a bit more bonds, maybe money market securities, which are like just loans. So, of course, they're zakatable at face value. So we found that 27%, we found that 1% difference. There's a Sharia compliant for that 1% less of these types of assets. And so equity, which is not Sharia compliant, is 27%. And then mixed markets, mixed funds, diversified, 50%. When it came to corporate bonds, it was 100% because, of course, all of them are loans and it's zakatable.
Sorry, Mufti Saab, I missed the one where you said about sukuk. What did you say for sukuk?
So for sukuk, it just depends. If it's an ijara sukuk, right? Then it'd be like the property fund. We apply the property fund kind of ratio, which would be 15%. But generally, it just depends because look, there's like over a dozen types of sukuk, right? A person might have a mutaraba sukuk, there might be musharaka, there might be a wakala, there might be a hybrid, which is very common now, a hybrid sukuk, right? It just really depends on the type of sukuk. If you have a sukuk, then it's best to contact us and say, look, this is the sukuk that we have, and then we can guide you accordingly, inshallah.
Inshallah, brilliant. And I guess at this point, I should tell people we're talking about pensions. A third of Muslims in the UK don't actually have a pension. And you should definitely get a pension if you don't have one, because your employer is giving you free money that you're refusing. And also, if you don't have a pension, then you're going to end up, the Muslim community as a whole is going to end up losing £13 billion over the course of the next generation due to people not having pensions. And, the Muslim community as a whole, we all have a collective responsibility, not just to look after our own investing, but ultimately we're going to die and pass away. We're going to pass on that money to someone else. And if at each generation, the stewards, i.e. you and I, are not doing a good job, then what we end up handing over to the next generation is a pot that's significantly smaller. So that's not a good thing. So inshallah, after Ramadan, we'll be sharing an opinion that we've had issued by a QC barrister, where if you are in a position where your employer doesn't actually have a halal pension available, then you can download that opinion and actually give that opinion to your HR, to your managers, and then they'll understand the legal responsibility to make sure that you have an Islamic pension available. But in other words, this is, I know pensions seems like a boring subject, but it's actually a really important one. That there's a drip, drip, drip effect that can add up to a huge amount of money over the course of a lifetime. So please, please, please do really pay attention to your pensions. And if you've not got one in particular, make sure you get one. If you have one, make sure it's halal and you're in the right kind of Islamic investments. With that, inshallah, I think we can now turn to the Q&A. Let the party commence. So the first question we have, is there such a 10% deduct from gold zakat?
I've never heard of that.
That's a gharib statement. Can I put zakat by cryptocurrency? I assume, unless you mean, can you pay zakat in crypto? Well, you can pay zakat in cryptocurrency with NZF, and you can also pay zakat on cryptocurrency, as we've discussed as well. So you can skin a cat both ways. If 25% is okay for stocks equities, why is the pension Sharia fund uses 26% in NZF calculator? If the pension fund comprises of all equity, should we still apply 26 or 25?
Yeah, it's a good question. The reason why these are kind of small difference. So for normal equity pension fund is 27%, and for Sharia is 26%. The difference is because a fund generally doesn't only consist of equity, right? You have 1%, even 0.5%, which I've seen personally, of cash that sits there before it's reinvested. So every quarter they readjust their portfolio, there's always some cash outstanding. And that's why I've commonly noticed. That's why there's that small discrepancy in variance between equity fund and equity and shares, right? So 25% for shares, but then for a fund, it generally has like a small percentage of cash, which is counted in the additional percentage.
Brilliant. Next question is, how much zakat is liable for mixed pot pensions, i.e. multi-asset mixed fund?
50%. It was literally 50%. That was like that's beautiful, right? If you think about it, it's mixed assets. I mean, this right one thing I think we should highlight here is about the Sharia compliance issue, right? Most likely, a multi-asset mixed fund will not be Sharia compliant because it's got corporate bonds in there, all sorts of things. So I'll be very, very sensitive to that. And I think IFG are doing a great job in terms of making sure people are Sharia compliant pensions, as they mentioned earlier.
I have bought cryptocurrency with my own money not borrowed, money that I can afford to lose, and lastly, not trading it, but investing it and sitting in it for a year or two. So will it be halal for me to invest in this asset class? I mean, I was expecting that question. I was expecting, do I need to pay zakat on it? But I mean, you got us. It's like an R.L. Stein novel where there's a twist at the end. So Mufti Sahib, over to you. Will it be halal for him to invest in this asset class?
I mean, you need to understand what you're investing in. What is it? What's the token? Right? What is it halal? What's the utility before you continue in that investment? To be honest, so I would pause, do a full review of what you've invested in. And this is, majority of people don't do this. They just think about money. And this is where it's very important. Our mindset is right when investing. Is first you think about whether it's halal, because you may invest and there may be money. If it's not halal, then you're making a loss. That's guaranteed.
Here's a random one. What about people who there are unfortunately quite a number of them, drug dealers in our community who are quite religious and they often give zakat. How should they think about that? People who have news agents and a big portion of their income comes from the sale of alcohol or tobacco. Restaurant owners who sell alcohol. And I imagine there's a few other people out there as well. In a nutshell, Mufti Sahib, how do you think about haram income?
Yeah. So in that scenario, what these brothers need to do, right, and sisters, is we would need to distance ourselves from the haram income altogether. First and foremost, is really important. We don't want to continue disobeying Allah, right? So really, there's no zakat on the haram income. So there's no, you don't pay 2.5% of haram income. Rather, you pay 100% on haram income, which means you have to get rid of everything. That is the real truth. The scholars have written classically that if a person, he had haram income and he's doing tawbah, he's changed his life. Now the only thing he has is haram income. Then and of course, if he was to give all of it away in one shot, he potentially become homeless, or he may be in need, independent of others. Therefore, he can gradually give, right, in charity whatever he's earned, right, across the years. So you set up a payment plan of £10, £20, whatever a month for riba and purification purposes, and get rid of that money. Right? You wouldn't have any zakat to pay. Really, there would be no zakat on such a person, because you never had any. From a Sharia perspective, you had no wealth. I mean, look at that, right? Just think of that, right? Sharia is saying you had no wealth whatsoever. And really, the Sharia kind of like consequence of that is you have to get rid of everything, because that money was not lawfully belonging to you. So I would say this is the most important thing. Of course, do tawbah the first, more than anything, is you turn to Allah. And it's very easy. Allah will bless you. Allah will accept you. Just because you did this in your life, it doesn't mean it's over. Rather, it's just a beginning for you, right? Allah will accept you. I mean, Allah, whenever a person, if you turn to Allah, Allah will never turn you away. So the doors are open for you.
Alhamdulillah. So there you've heard it. You should, if you are in that kind of situation, then use this, inshallah, to be a path to essentially get back onto the Sirat al-Mustaqim. And I guess it's a tough one. So for people who are maybe younger and listening to this, don't get into haram things in the first place, because once you get into a haram career and once you start earning haram, it's very difficult to extricate yourself out of it easily. Imagine if the owner of William Hill now became a Muslim. I guess it might be slightly different because they've become a Muslim now, but you can imagine situations where people are having to give away literally millions and millions of pounds. So just, I guess, don't get into it in the first place.
I know people who've done that. They've changed their lives overnight. They've got rid of everything. They started again from scratch. I've seen Allah has blessed them twice as much, right? Because if you've got the ability to make money, a lot of money, it's because you have a skill or potential. Wherever you sit, Allah will open up. And when you got Allah's help with you, it'll only multiply.
Definitely. Qasim is asking, if you owe someone money but not sure when you can pay it back, how do you treat this under deductibles?
Yeah, so you just need to be very clear of when you will pay. If you are planning to repay the person within 1 year, you can deduct the full amount. However, if you intend to pay the person after 2 years, 3 years, then you don't deduct this at all right now.
Makes a lot of sense. Buy-to-let property. I appreciate the income you receive is zakatable. If I have equity in property, then is that zakatable? If so, how much zakat is payable?
So in that scenario, if it's a buy-to-let, there's no zakat on the property value itself.
Brilliant. And Mufti Sahib, a little bit on the deductibles then. Some people have Islamic mortgages and other people have conventional mortgages. How should they, deduct from the payments that they need to make for those over the course of the next year?
Yeah, so when it comes to conventional mortgages, for whatever reason, if a person had that, they knew it's not Sharia compliant, but they were forced or whatever, they can deduct 1 year's worth of capital repayments, but not the interest payments. When it comes to Islamic mortgages, because they work on acquisition and rent, then scholars are of the view that you can only deduct 1 month's worth of repayment, because who knows whether you'll be renting from them in 2-3 months' time. You might get money and buy out the property, right? So that rent is never guaranteed, which will be paid in the future.
Yeah, makes sense. And what about 401k accounts in the US? Should they be treated as a zakatable pension?
Yeah, this is a good question. I just had a scholar recently from America, a Mufti who I just spoke with, and I mean, I just gave him the same proxies. I said, look, to be honest, this is another whole area which needs to be reviewed, just like how we did the research in the UK for our pension plan. There needs to be a full review of the 401ks and the different types of funds there. to understand. And I believe that some American scholars do want to do this after Ramadan. This Mufti did mention it to me that that's something that they want to now embark upon and do. But my advice to anybody asks me, I feel that the kind of research that we've done in the UK, again, by and large, would be very similar for the US as well. So in the meantime, I would say if you were to use this, inshallah, it should suffice for your calculation.
Brilliant. And a related question here is, how do you think about, like from a zakat perspective, how important is ownership or qabd or control over assets? Because people often ask that question.
Yeah, so I mean, look, ownership is a must, of course, but that ownership can be reflected in many ways. Like in English law, we have like the idea of interest, right? You have either beneficial interest. Ownership is never like you always have legal title of something, right? When you're investing through a vehicle, you always have a beneficial interest. That suffices from a Sharia perspective for ownership, right? Qabd and possession, again, a person would have possession or this idea of qabd, which is having the ability to uh, transact or use that asset or make decisions and have some kind of authority over that. You can delegate that authority to a fund manager. Okay, so that would be suffice as well. So it's not necessary for you to have access per se, which means I can use the money in an investment right now, and then only then there's a cut. That's not necessary. Rather, the fact that you own it, you have some kind of interest in the investment, and secondly, you've delegated control of that. That would suffice for zakat purposes.
And what about, sorry, this is a random question, but what about land? Because people often have land in places like Pakistan, India, and what have you. How should they think about that?
In that regard, many of them, it's not really like trading property or trading land. Rather, they invest and buy for long term, right? They might use it, they might sell it when the children get married, right? So it's almost like an insurance kind of scheme for them. In that scenario, again, that's not zakatable at all.
And what about land that they like? It's agricultural land.
If it's agricultural land, then and they're growing crops, and potentially there's ushar on there, which is like a 10% or 5%, depending on how it's being irrigated. So it's on the produce, and not all produce. It's the common kind of like produce that's grown, which would be zakatable. But again, I would say when it comes to these types of stuff, it would be best to consult your local scholars, because there's a bit of like a discussion on kharaji land and ushri land in the classical books, where different types of land have a different ruling. So it would just be good to speak to your local scholars when it comes to specific types of land.
We've got a question from Muhammad Saad Rafiq, who's asking about how you think about the long term, because he's got some money that he doesn't need at the moment. He's invested it for a couple of years, hoping for an increase. Is this a trade or a long-term investment? He's trying to work out when does it become long-term? When does it become short-term?
Okay, so the simple thing, the way to understand this is if you've purchased this with the sole intention to resell, and you're actively looking to resell, just waiting for the price to go up, right? That is like a short-term trading. Yeah, that's what you call trading. You're looking to resell. The options are not between should I sell now or I will not sell. Rather, the price. The only like variables is which price it is. That's all. That's trading. But if you have invested with the intention, look, I'm not reselling right now. I will sell potentially after 2 years. So right now, I'm not really concerned with the price movements at all. That's a sign that you're not really trading in that. You've invested for long-term purposes, and therefore it will not be zakatable right now at the full value, of course, on its underlying zakatable assets.
Two really interesting questions. One is, zakat on business inventory is calculated on the current market value. However, for an e-commerce business, there would also be platform fees, e.g., Amazon, eBay, etc. Can I factor these in when calculating current market value?
Yeah, any fees which have already been incurred, right? You can factor them in. But if it's future fees, right? So, for example, every time there's a sale, potentially in the future, then there'll be a fee. That fee you can't deduct right now because now you haven't realized the income to even deduct the expense, and therefore, or it's not even been incurred your income, so you can't deduct that right now. You'll pay zakat on the full value on your stock and not deduct that.
Understood. And do you pay zakat on children's savings, whether it's in the child trust fund or junior ISAs, etc.?
Yeah, so that all depends on, as you know, different schools have different views on zakat on children, and I'm talking about minors, like under 10 or something, where the Hanafi school is of the view there's no zakat on children whatsoever on the wealth, and the other madhabs, the majority, the Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali schools are of the view that there is zakat on the wealth of children. So if you follow the majority view, then yes, zakat would be due upon the children's savings if they equal to nisab. You could pay zakat from the children's wealth as a guardian, as a parent, or you can pay from your own wealth. That's absolutely fine. And of course, if you follow the Hanafi school, then there's nothing to worry about.
Brilliant. Great. Well, let's I guess wrap up there. Jazakallah khair everyone who's tuned in, and Jazakallah khair to Mufti Saab for making the time, and for NZF for all of the hard work that you guys have done over the course of the last month, but also over the last few years. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you and put barakah in all of these efforts, and eventually, inshallah, make you redundant. Right? That's the goal, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So that NZF doesn't have to exist anymore. And to all of you who are listening, then I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He puts blessing in these last 10 days and guides us to the straight path and allows us to really use this last 10 days to get closer to Him. And if you do have any further questions, then do feel free to go on nzf.org.uk / I think it's knowledge, but anyway, you can Google it and you can find out lots of the resources there. Just put in NZF, and obviously we've got a bunch of resources on Islamic Finance Guru as well, which you'll find as well if you just Google it. Jazakallah khair once again to everyone. Until next time, assalamu alaikum wa